who are your advocates, right? Because at least the fundings from the state to the county to your district, all those funds get accounted, right? Like they're like, okay, we got the money. Cool. Let's bring the population that needs the help.
Mm-hmm.
But then who are the workers? Who are the advocates from that community that go above and beyond to work for the family? So now it's out of the government's hand.
Yeah.
Because it's like, hey, here's a fiscal year. I already gave you the money.
Yeah.
And then the last 3 months, I went to check on your charts or I went to check on your files. And then I did auditing. Some of you need improvements. Some of you, it's totally fine. You know, you got that fiscal year money. Do it. So who are those advocates? That's where you got to put full effect. Principals, like out of schools, right? That, like I mentioned, right? Where are these administrators to give the extra support? Principals, they have to be at 3 places at once. Vice principals, they have to do the principal's job, right? And then the secretary has to do the vice principal's job and their job on top of it.
Yeah.
Right. So there's really much we can do. So the opportunity comes from having these nonprofit organizations plugged into and then do the best you can. But here comes the county, though. The county comes and says, hey, you know what? If you're going to get these funds, you got to prove it that you're legitimately providing these services and not making things up out of thin air that you helped out Gene Doe and John Doe. You got to prove it by paperwork. So here comes the paperwork, and then your job has to teach you how to formulate how to jot down the notes, the clinical notes, so you could get those fundings back, right?
Yeah.
And get reimbursed for that money and time and then you get paid, right?
Yeah.
So the real question is, are your advocates doing enough for your community, right? Those people that are in charge, whether it's through mental health and whatnot.
Yeah.
Because the governor can just do so much. It's like, you paid your taxes. I gave you the fiscal year money.
Mm-hmm.
The rest is pretty much up to you. And they dust off their hand.
Yeah.
Comparing it to schools, right? And this is where the state comes. And then they're like, oh, yeah, we're professionals of the classroom. Mm-hmm. And then they tell the district what to do. And then the district comes and they're like, oh, yeah, we're the professional of the example. It's like me, right? I drive a car. I drive a vehicle. I don't go to my mechanic and tell him how to do his job.
Yeah.
You know, because I don't know what's best for my car. I just tell him, hey, this is the problem I notice in my car, and I just want to know what parts I need to repair and what parts I need to buy and how much am I investing in this part. And then can I come in on such and such date to drop off my car, right?
Yeah.
So that is different from what's going on nowadays, is that they dictate you like how to help your community.
Mm-hmm.
But those are just guides, right? They just call it guidelines and they go about their day. But who is the advocates? The money is distributed. The community help is there. What can you do for your community when the money comes in?
Yeah.
That's the thing we got to ask ourselves. Are we really pro mental health? The state says yes. The county says yes. The city says yes. But then the people that took the jobs to be advocates for mental health, what are they doing? You know, of course, they have to do something, but they have to prove to the county that they're doing their jobs. Mm-hmm. Right? It's a lot of trickle effect.
There's an accountability issue.
Basically, back and forth.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's why things that have delayed so much from this job experience, from what I learned in mental health, is that if we could relax on the charts and relax on the assessments, I think we could progress something and have the wheel turning.
Yeah.
And right now we're just reinventing the tire over and over and over again. We haven't put that tire to use to effect when rubber meets the road. And we always tell clients, hey, when rubber meets the road, right? When you're in there in the real world, this is how you're supposed to apply yourself.
Yeah.
A lot of our community do need help. Like, for instance, you know, the county library will send the library mobile for free and have the kids check out a book, or even teach them, you know, how to sign up for a library card. So it's like, hey man, just give me your student ID. Comparing to back in our day, we needed to know our own social security number or something.
Yeah.
And then pay $5 fee. Then you get your library card, and then you need an adult to co-sign for you. Nowadays, kids don't need that. All you need is your school ID.
Yeah.
Let's help you get a library card, scan it, and then you get all these perks, right? So like in San Francisco, if you go to the website, you could get tickets to go to Alcatraz basically for free, right? Or right here in Monterey County, if you're a resident of Monterey County and you have an ID and you prove a residency, you get free tickets to go to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, right? Mm-hmm. And you could get up to 4 or 5 tickets and, you know, escort whoever is your guest and to the aquarium and you're done, right? But at least there's not that hurdle. Like in my organization, it took a lot of building community and a lot of great advocates to partner up with schooling coordinators and say, hey, you guys are shorthanded. Mm-hmm. School psychiatrists could do so much. School counselors could do so much. because it's a caseload. We're talking about 100 kids or more on people's hands.
Yeah.
Let me take that off your hands, and this is what we provide. And then they build that bridge.
Yeah.
And a contract is signed. What I found out when I first got hired, and let me put this into sports, right? Who gets the first bid, like the draft, or like Eastern Western Conference trades, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or like bid contracts, like who gets one night in TNT, who gets that coverage. It's like that. I was tripping out. I was like, what? You gotta be kidding me. We have to get bids on schools too to sign that contract. That's crazy.
Wow.
Like, I didn't know that. Yeah.
So it goes to the biggest buyer.
The biggest bidder, yeah.
Wow.
And then sometimes if we're not getting resource from that school, we have to pull out and be like, yo, I'm taking my therapist out of your school because I'm not seeing referrals coming in. And that's what we were there for. We were there to build referrals. And I've seen it already twice this fiscal year, saying they had to pull therapists and case managers out because it's like, hey, you're not building referrals. We're wasting our time here.
Yeah. It's really, I don't know how I feel about that. I get it though. I don't know if you guys watched the show The Wire, but a big part of what I got from that show was the fact it's like the police department doesn't exist, or it has no real purpose if crime doesn't exist, right? And then the thing is with the drug dealers and all that, like the reason why they're doing what they're doing is because that's all they know what they do to survive and not kind of move forward in life in terms of making any sort of income and whatnot. They don't have degrees, they don't have the applied skills to get a job. And if anything, they look down on it. The money is too slow, right? Like getting a check every 2 weeks is not as fast as getting drug money. But then it just feels interesting because the show does go into those politics of the budget for the police is based off how much crime there is in the area, which is why season 5, it was about like the police officer and he ends up making up a crime and gets the media involved to cover it and makes a whole spiel, like some like mysterious killers out there that no one knows, but they're out there. And he does that purposely so that they could sign off on getting a budget to do other stuff, which he needed the money in the budget to get all the equipment that they need, the cameras and everything, so that he can go actually investigate this other case that's a real case. But it's just kind of crazy to see how all that functions. And I think this bleeds into even like the prison system and all that, where like the prison building exists, but it needs to have inmates, because if there's no inmates, then there's no reason why it should exist. So why put money towards it or something like that, right? And then in a way you kind of depend that crime happens, you know what I mean? And yeah, it's just interesting. Like it's interesting seeing certain professions rely on something problematic in order for it to be viable for them to even be there, but they can't just be there out of goodwill. Like in the case of the therapist, like they can't be there just because they should be there. No. If there's nothing coming down the pipeline, then there's no point in them being there according to the company that they're employed to or whatever. It's such a tricky thing. It's really tough. For me, that's a little tough to see.
Yeah. One of my peers has hustled to get those referrals in and stayed at that school and was not pulled out from that school. We got time to go on breaks and associate with these kids, right? It's easier for elementary school students because you could go to the recess and lunch and just be there with them and bill for doing yard duty, basically. And if you see something off, you could approach that kid. Hey, I noticed this, and that. You want to come and step into my office and talk that out and then advocate for them for the teacher. It's like, hey, I'm going to take 10 minutes out of his time and then I'll bring him or her back because I noticed something in their behavior. I want to give them additional support.
Yeah.
And then it could be all there and there. As far for like the prison system and like being problematic, if that whole thing is like, there was a lot of companies that came into the state prison system and started being the sponsored, and all these sponsors, right, that you don't see. And then you see the whole thing, it's a correctional facility of rehabilitation, right? But you don't see these big sponsors that are putting in money to keep an inmate inside the walls. And not only that, the metaphor goes as far as this, to keep them in a fishbowl, basically, because that's what it is.
Yeah.
And to see, the difference between who is in the general population to who are those that are PC'd out. And PC'd out is those who are gang dropouts or the rapists, right?
Yeah.
So those guys get PC'd out right away. And they can't be in general population because there was a prison riot and there was a body on the floor.
Yeah.
And then the state has to investigate for why there's a dead body on the floor and who's going to get a much more expensive sentence, whoever was in charge of that killing, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of politics that go on.
Yeah.
They give you this rule book to read it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then you got to learn the prison politics from the inmates because that's what's going to keep you afloat. And you got to do program.
Yeah.
And it's all based on race and your region of race too, So there's that.
I'm learning that stuff on TikTok, by the way.
Yeah. And you shoot me some videos and try to get confirmation. I'm like, Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
But then some of the former inmates that are out and about, and I'm proud of them because nobody needs to be behind the walls, especially the trauma that people get is insensitated. Someone got killed, all right, whatever. Not like that, but like what I'm trying to say is that they're telling their experience from a general population, which I got exposed for a little bit working in the prison. I would go to the main line. I was nervous as hell, but an elderly person that was a coworker, he helped me how to walk the line. Like, you're going to go be here. You're going to teach this. You're going to teach the lifers, and lifers are mixed with the general population that are short termers. They were very respected, right? And then we would give them incentives like a movie day, or we would take a pie, but you have to talk, you have to write to the warrant. But what I'm trying to get is that I didn't get much experience of working in the main line a lot. I was just be that substitute teacher, like that coverage worker. All right, I'm going to the main line. Cool. I'm going to cover this class. All right. But I didn't know that much politics until people from the PC yard would tell me, yeah, we've been to from experience, and they would make relatable stories for the others, so they don't have to go through that.
Appreciate like you put that perspective on it, being from a nonprofit, because I think so many people want to talk as if things are hopeless. Like there's no way for things to get better, or like how do we help?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest is like, well, just actually get involved.
Who's going to advocate for your community? Because there's tons of work, and the work keeps piling up in the community, and we need to find alternate solutions for everybody. Also, when you come to the line of mental health, the rule of thumb here, from my experience, and I'm going to apply it for myself, I can say for everybody, my rule of thumb here, I'm not going to be some knight in shining armor for anybody. If you want to do the work, let's do the work together. If you like giving out, I have an open door policy. If you're not ready, you're not ready. And like, be honest with yourself and then with me, in order to do it. Reentry programs is different. It's like, have you ever seen this little cart on a railing track that people used to do during the gold mines? They used to, like, people at both ends. If that little rail cart got off track, right, and you're in a reentry program like in a prison, you got to learn how to put it back on track, right? That's the metaphor they use for like mental health, right? So you could go back on track and get back to your destination and not waste time of not putting. Prison is supposed to be like the little cart went off the rail, and then people, because of everything that's going on in their prison environment, they forget to put that cart back on the track. And then when they go out to society, and there's a lot of hurdles in society, which is another thing that we need to invest on, is it's actually this. You go to a halfway house, you're a committed felon, right? And you're trying to find a job. And then when you find a job, your probation officer or this other officer, they have to like check up on you, and they tell you, hey, at this hour, I'm going to go check up on you. It's at a random time, and they check up on you. But like, hey, I was at work. I can't leave my job that you told me to get, and then just to comply to you. How does that even work? So it's a parole officer or a probation officer. If you have a parole officer, they're strict. If you have a probation officer, you have to comply to them. But it's tough. Like, you want to reenter to community. And then there's a lot of things. And then Donald shared with me about this podcast, right, about cow gangs and how's that tied in with the Nipsey Hussle story. Rest in peace. I listened to this podcast back in 2021, how there's a lot of unwritten rules for felons when they come out, right? You can't live with people that are associated with crime or in gangs. You can't live in certain neighborhoods. You can't go to that certain liquor store over there. All these unwritten rules. And then you got to find a job, but then your probation officer or parole officer, they got to see you at random times. If you don't comply, guess what? You get sentenced. You get sentenced all over again. You got to go through the booking process, and you're back inside the walls. So it sucks for that. So that's another different topic conversation to get into.
Yeah, I think that's something Donald was touching on earlier. It sucks how funding for different programs runs. It's almost like you got to have the problem continue to be a problem in order to justify some of these things. Like you mentioned, all this private funding that goes into prisons. There's money keeping it going because it turned into a business, right?
Yeah, it's a big business. Like, for instance, the Soledad State Prison where I was working at, their funding was basically to do prison uniform and to do these nice furniture. And let me tell you the name of the furniture. Boston. If you see a Boston furniture, it was made in Soledad State Prison by level 1, level 2 inmates. So to be at level 2, you got to stop doing crime inside of the walls in order to get at least a cheap labor job inside the prison. So that's part of your program, right? And you go work Monday through Friday from 8:30 all the way to 3 o'clock because you got to do other programming and stuff. I seen this cloth of CDCR uniforms that they supply to other prisons within the state. That is CDCR. It's crazy. The furniture kicks butt, but it's cheap labor too. But it's like, wow. If you guys want a good desk chair, purchase Boston. You know how like back in our days when we used to see films, the inmates would do like License plates, that's a no, whole different prison in California. I don't know which one, but every prison has their own manufacturer thing. But you have to earn it, and it's hard to earn to be at a level 2 or a level 1, right? And another thing that it's a politics here, they get trained to be a CalState fireman, one of the most hazardous jobs in the planet. So in case of state of emergency, whether the Southland gets a fire or up in the Napa, Santa Rosa Valley gets a fire, right? The Cal State Fire would get these ex-con, right? These felons. But guess what? You're doing it for free. Secondly, if you get hurt, you get hurt. All we have to do is report to the state you got hurt under our watch, but you died a brave soul. But there's no guaranteed job once you're out because you have a rap sheet that says you were an ex-felon. And that's why prisoners like, oh, forget Cal State Fire. But at least they do it for programming, for like CPR or how to put up a fire and this and that. Some prisoners rather not go into that profession. It's really at risk and it's not a guaranteed job.
Yeah, that's something that we didn't find out until recently.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many California fires in the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then that's when we started hearing about it. That someone passing away, putting these fires out, and then this whole thing of even getting paid for it. Yeah, that's something that was just barely released. You know, it was barely uncovered.
Yeah.
And it pissed a lot of people off. But like we always talk about, okay, it's a headline this week, this month, and then you move on to the next, and then no one cares anymore.
Yeah. And you know what's the metaphor? We don't call them inmates, we call them participants because we wanted to get them out of that mentality that they're in. So we tell them there's always a locksmith on call. And guess what? Those locks are always fixed to keep you locked in, to keep you inside these walls. Just remember that. The locks are always tight. They're always fixed up to par. So like, be careful like what you do in them, basically. And if you want to know like the size of a cell, go to your bathroom and lie down in your bathtub if you have a bathtub, or lie down in the shower and do that for 4 hours and then see how you feel. That's basically the experience inside a cell. Just take out that bathtub and put a steel bunk with no mattress.
Yeah, dude. So the mental health thing, since you're working with people with that, how do you view it? Do you think therapy is something that you should always be talking to a therapist? That's how casually I think we're trying to make talking about what you're dealing with, or you made the analogy of like putting it back on the track and make sure it's working properly. Do you think talking to someone about your problems is like a short-term thing or a long-term thing?
It's depending what goal you want to reach, right? First of all, therapists need to talk to other therapists. That's the name of the game, because you're going to hear other people's problems and you might bring that home, you might not, but you need to talk to a helper. Helpers help themselves. Like the same way alcoholics and addicts, when they go through rehabilitation, they go to a 12-step program, they invest themselves in the program for full lifetime recovery. So back to the 12-step program, when you're ready to work on yourself and the therapist is depending what goals you want to reach in life. What is actually that you want to accomplish? So it could be a year, it could be a couple months. Did you reach that goal? Did you practice? Did you apply yourself? Right? This doesn't need to be a forever thing. And people lapse. It's okay to make a mistake and then just go back to therapy and get yourself reevaluated. And it's totally fine. It's totally normal. I remember Donald and I, we were talking this about few years ago. In our community, even mentioning therapy is a taboo. And in the Latino community, it still goes on to this day that it's a taboo. In the Black and Latino community, that it's like, nah, man, that stuff is crazy, Even Middle Easterns think it's a taboo. Why would I pay money to talk about my problems to someone else, when I have my relatives to talk my problems about? And it's for free. So there's always that taboo. And that's when I come in and I psychoeducate families how this process works. But there's no end date when you want to fix yourself. It's better to do it now in life than do it in the afterlife, basically, or come back reincarnated as something else for your unfinished business until you master it, right?
You're like, I still got trauma from being a pharaoh, It's like my past lives, I got to sort all that out. I do like the fact that you mentioned that one person was like, well, I talked to my relatives about my problems. I'm like, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in America, there's so many people who's like, by the time they're 18, it's like, I want to be on my own. I want to move out with my parents. I want to move to LA or whatever. But sometimes it is this whole thing of, I got to do it all on my own type of mindset. Talk to someone else. Like, oh, I got problems, I got issues. It's like, well, we all do, because we're all like burdened on ourselves. We all want to open up and talk to other people about what's really going on with us. Especially with LA, sometimes you walk around, everyone's putting on a face because they're trying to make it or whatever.
Yeah, and here's a reality check at 19 years old by a professor. He was like, don't say you're out here because of your own. You're not paying for your tuition on your own, right?
Mm-hmm.
You do this because your family had to put the right foot forward for you to be here. So don't say you're doing it on your own, right? That's the mentality we grew up with. Like, oh man, I got to raise up out of here. So you making the chess move to change your environment is one thing. But to say that you made it on your own is a whole different ordeal, because regardless of the fact you had your parents' support one way or another in your lifetime, or a wise person, an adult that had life experience to motivate you to be in a different place or a different scenario. Here's what I've learned from inmates, from lifers. Change your personality first before you change the environment. Because if you're not going to change yourself and you want to move out of the environment, you're not going to apply yourself. So I might have moved out of LA, but through life experience, I had to learn the hard way to be where I'm at today. And a lot of mistakes and burdens were made because I was that 18-year-old, left the house, said I made it on my own. So I got that reality check. And I got more reality checks along the way. To this day, as an adult, right, I make those minor mistakes and people put me right back on track. So you got to have either those coworkers that have experience in the field that you're working in to help you lead the right way. And all right, off he goes, or you got those peers that could help you reevaluate yourself. And it's all like, having that mirror image reflecting like really who you are. And sometimes it sucks to see the reality of who you really are.
That was a great point, man, because I always bother when I hear them say like, well, if I do this, then I'll be happy. Or do this, then I'll feel good about who I am or my situation. And that's a big thing to tell people. It's like, yo, are you good with you?
Exactly.
You get up in the morning and like, you know what? I'm happy to be me. I feel good about what I do. And then you bring that to other people. And instead, people replace that with fake it till you make it, keep smiling until you actually feel happy type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
That is a way of going about things. But deep down, if you're just carrying all this baggage with you and it's not resolved, it doesn't help if you just distract yourself or ignore it, Yeah, dude. That's what I always say with me in therapy. It's like, yo, man, I'd rather pay someone to listen to my problems than burden somebody else.
Yeah. I had to teach even family members, right? Our own family is not their job to listen to our problem, right? It's not their job. And sometimes I had to tell friends. They would say, oh, hey, have some friends, because I've been in this experience. Oh, my mom is complaining about X, Y, and Z, and it's already like burning on me. I was like, yo, honestly, if you reflect back, like, I gotta let you know, your mom has no more control because they're up there in age.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the youth. They don't have the mobility. They don't have the energy anymore. They'd rather express their frustration, and it's painful. And they don't know how to express it the right way because some of our elders were not emotionally developed well. They express things the wrong way in a negative connotation. The thing, like how you mentioned earlier, Mike, how people say, if I rather do this, will it be better? And yeah, that's a good follow-up question. Are you good with yourself? And additionally to that, if you plan it out, write it down. Don't let everybody know, because there's some ears that are not going to have that constructive feedback on you. To me, I might have a lot of peers right here, right? But I always go back to you guys. And then I could be like, hey, how can I improve in this? Because I was thinking I made this error. I don't know. Have you had this experience? And then I could get like a trusted feedback from you guys than some of the peers that I have right here, because I built community, you guys, since, the mid 90s. That's why we know each other, and community still that we have, even though I'm the one who's far away. It's just one phone call away, and I see what I could improve on myself, right? Because I could rely on that constructive feedback. But it took a lot of experience to learn how to get that constructive feedback and how to apply yourself and how to build yourself up of one of the things you don't have.
No, that's a great point. How to take in that constructive criticism, because a lot of people have a thin skin.
Yeah.
And they hear one thing that just sets them off, and it's like, I don't want to hear that. But to be able to say, you know what? This person's telling me that this is a flaw that I have because they want me to improve. And that's going to help me just improve my overall quality of life. If I can address.
And also, even though like you have that close friend or you have that close relative, it's always to ask them that courtesy. It's like, hey, do you want to hear my constructive feedback, or do you want to be listened to? Because if you want to be listened to, yo, I hear you. And I want you to know that I validate everything that you're saying. But if you want constructive feedback, sure. Let's see what will be a smart way to get you there.
Mm-hmm.
It just takes a lot of work, and it takes from both ends. Like, I know 2 friends of mine that they haven't communicated about respect each other's boundaries.
Yeah.
And they use me as a mediator. And then I always have to be like, hey, you know what? I hear they say this and I hear you say that. We all agree on this, Stop taking it the wrong way.
Yeah, it's very true.
Like a couples therapy, but I saw something recently and where that was something that people, exactly the points that you were making. It's, sometimes people just want to know that you're listening to them. So just acknowledge, like, I hear what's going on. And then moving past, like, okay, now that you listen, now maybe we can actually have a back and forth and resolve whatever misunderstanding we have. But like you said, it's like, are we talking to just listen to the other person, or actually talking to kind of maybe resolve a conflict or get to the bottom of something? Because if you just want to just vent, and I just listen. Sometimes people just need that. Sometimes they're stressed out
Mm-hmm.
and they just got to blow off steam, and they want you to be that support. But then, like you said, it's like, oh man, after that whole session, no, I got to blow off my own steam, you know?
Yeah. Ooh.
I think this is why I also feel like communication is important, because it's better to do that than to keep it in. If those are your options, it's tough because I know that if you have to go off and do your thing and then it affects somebody else, then they gotta go off. But I don't know. I feel like the other side of it would be if you kept it in, what would that be like? You know what I mean? If you
Yeah.
don't say these things, what would it feel like? But I guess in a way, that's why you would pay a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
At least they're equipped and there's an understanding of why they're there in your life. It just makes it easier. I think at the same time too, there's just certain things you're gonna tell the therapist that you would never tell your family member, no matter what. That's just what it is.
And in confidence too.
Yeah, something about telling something to a complete stranger to you that just feels right. You know what I mean? They're not gonna go off and tell my cousins and my aunts and my uncles and siblings
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. It's just like, hey, like if this is the last time I see you, oh well, like this
Mm-hmm.
about me, or that I said this or whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
as long as it's not criminal, that's all.
Yeah. Oh, or harming yourself, basically, right?
Yeah, but I totally get it.
Consider this when you work with a therapist. What I've learned is when you're talking to a therapist, you're getting the answer to your own question, right? Let's put it that as this analogy, right? So when you go back to Pro Tools and edit things,
Mm-hmm.
you hear, doesn't the light bulb going off? Like, oh man, oh, this is the part I got to edit. This is the part I got to improve. Oh man, let me fix the volume over here, right?
Yeah.
So basically, you're the person that's press recording, and the therapist is the engineer in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes because there's a lot of things in the community that change. There's going a lot of changes within society alone. They got to know what society and what background, what kind of community you come from in order to help you to apply. And if they don't have the answers, they have to tell you right away, hey, I'm ethical to tell you that I don't have the answers right now and I have to get back on that. But why don't we look on it together and make research on it in the area that you need the most work on?
Mm-hmm.
And that's about it. And they can't criticize based on your personality because all you got to do is talk, and you get the answers to your own questions, or you get realization or understanding in life,
Mm-hmm.
which is great. When your family tells something problems, you get the ay bendito pobrecito, right? What's wrong with you? You get criticized really harshly.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah.
like, here, have a mop. That'll take the
Yeah.
stress off your day,
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not as healthy. But yeah, you're right. As long as it's nothing incriminating or self-harming, I think you'll be in the right path.
Yeah, and I think that's why sometimes I think certain people abuse certain substances like alcohol or something where
Fill that void.
it's to fill, yeah, exactly. So yeah.
It's like, what if fill that hole, right? So here's where cognitive behavioral therapy comes into play. What's your personality like? What's your thoughts? What's your values? What's your beliefs? What's the negative consequences you came from? What is the end result of that? And how to go back and improve it. So you don't have to fill that hole that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the first alcohol buzz is the best alcohol buzz you have, but that doesn't mean it fixed it. The first one was great.
Mm-hmm.
The third and second one, it's just a numbing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's no longer enjoyable because you got to fill that hole in your heart and you put this face.
Yeah.
The same way with people. I don't know if you've seen these ads on social media platforms. Hey, look out for the happy ones because they're the ones that could really mask off and not show their depressions, and then they commit suicide.
Yeah.
Right. So there's also that part, right, where they don't want to be a burden for someone and then didn't ask for help. And another thing, talking about death is not a taboo to bring into the table with your family too, because, you got to prepare in life because this life is only short term and life is fragile.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be prepared to say your goodbyes. And it's hard. You cry because of the absence. I learned this saying that says, when we have our elders die, you miss that inspiration, that knowledge. You're going to miss it. And there's no one to give you that knowledge moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And to console your grief, you got to apply whatever knowledge to them and then duplicate it from what you learned from them in life. And then you put a band-aid on grief, but you still hold grief. But it depends. You either accept it or you stay depressed and you trickle down and you stay stuck forever.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You got those two choices. Oh, man. If you have a son or daughter die, you lose that hope that you were inspired.
Mm-hmm.
You lose that hope that what they could have offered to the world. So that's why death shouldn't be much of a taboo. And that's why we grieve, either the hope or the knowledge that we lost along the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, talking to a therapist shouldn't be a taboo. It should be very exposed. And it's a great benefit to have within our families because we come from different walks of life and we happen to meet, right? So like with us, our center point was at Immaculate Conception School.
Mm-hmm.
And then we took different routes after that.
Yeah.
Different packs of life. And then boom, we reunited over here. And then, hey, what did your life experience? I was like, oh yeah, you moved out of LA. Well, what life experience is like, oh yeah, like I made a family out of it, now I'm back here visiting LA. I work for this kind of nonprofit agency and I want to still get in the career goal of education and whatnot. That's still, what I'm passionate for or what I want to dedicate my time for.
Mm-hmm.
So we recircle back. Where we came from is from our family's living room, basically. And then boom, we were led to ISIS and then we come back from our own trial and reflect back on what we got through.